Hey, what's up, guys? Michael Gilly here from FloMarching, and we've got a very special treat for you today on the drill down. Joining us as usual is Andy Shama, and we have a very special guest, Erik Kosman, the lead sound engineer for the Bluecoats. So,
yeah, welcome.
How's everybody doing?
Yeah,
how you doing?
Good.
So yeah, we're gonna wrap about some things. We're gonna talk about the DCI winter meetings, kind of get some things, some background information on the rules proposals and the procedures and the instructor caucuses. Instructor caucuses. I think I said that right?
Caucuses, yeah, plural.
And we're also going to talk to Erik about some of the sound stuff. Erik was gracious enough to do a part of an electronics panel, and it just kind of blew everybody's mind. I think everybody walked out of it just kind of like.
Yeah, I'm really jealous I couldn't be there. It seems like drum corps' greatest minds all in one place, just talking about everything that they're 100% passionate about. It's really cool.
Yeah, so let's just talk about the some of the rules changes and procedure stuff that we've that came across, and you were there as well too. So actually, let's back up. Let's give us a little bit about your background. Like, how did you come into drum corps and then end up in the position that you did?
Yeah, I think like a lot of folks, I saw the DCI videos. Band director showed me. Actually, our first marching band show that I did was a Skywriter show.
Oh wow, you went old school.
Just kind of, I thought it was great, and auditioned. Didn't audition for the Cavaliers. Didn't make it. I was 15 or 16. Did Division III, Division II. Finally made the Bluecoats and did 4 years at Bluecoats.
Wow.
I mean, how did you get into the sound part of it, doing all the electronics and the application?
So I started teaching front ensembles right around the time when this stuff started blowing up, and that was your job. There was no kind of where my role is now. That didn't exist. There was no electronics guy. It was just if you wanted, mics on your keyboards and synthesizers, then you needed to make it work. So I kind of say it's kind of like fixing your car. I'm not a car person, but I can fix whatever on my car has been broken. So I could do all the sound things that I know I needed to do, and I kind of saw the value of it, and had a lot of good friends and teachers who really knew what they were doing. It's a very open community as far as sharing tips and how to do things and information and all that. So just kind of going from there, lots of YouTube videos.
I was about to say, I remember that mid-2000 period when everybody was trying to explore where to put mics and how to hang them and whatnot. And I imagine that YouTube got a lot of traffic off of percussion guys trying to figure out what to do with mics and electronics and snakes and everything else. So all right, so rules changes. We're going to talk about some of the ones that passed and how we kind of feel like it's going to be affecting everything, and we'll talk about a couple that didn't go through. And some of them are procedural as well too. So expanding the chorus from 150 to 154 doesn't sound like a big thing as far as the numbers concerned, but I think the primary driver behind that was seats available on the bus. Because there were previously empty seats, or alternates were filling those spots, and now they can have performing members fill those spots on the buses. Yeah,
it really gives the corps a little bit of flexibility as well. If you want to go to 80 brass and still have a full color guard and have 3 drum majors, you can do that now. Whereas before you had to really kind of pick and choose those last couple of spots. And the kids, like you said, most of them are alternates, so they're already on tour anyway, so there's not really a financial swing, so it was kind of a like, they're there, let's get them on the field. Everybody wins.
I also saw that there was a push or a motion to even raise it to 160. How did that go by?
I think it was one of those things where folks were, the debate was, like, if you start feeding the monster, if you will, like if you start feeding the fire, like, okay, we're going to end up at 160, or we're going to end up at 168, or we're going to end up at 200.
What's the rationale for stopping, really?
At what point do you say, hey, look, let's, let's put a cap on it. So.
And 160 kind of changed the calculus as well. With 154, you still have bus seats for some alternates, not as many as you had, but some. If you max out 160 on the field, now you don't have bus spots for alternates, and I think that's something that what the members are forced to do now is so much more physical and grueling, and those injuries do happen, and you can't spend 2-3 weeks trying to get someone fresh off tour back in. So.
And as corps get better and better at doing that physical training part of it and mitigating the injuries, they'll get better at that. But yeah, totally makes sense.
There was a music analysis change, and we're going to kind of talk about it. It's actually 2 rule changes.
Yeah.
But we're going to kind of talk about them at the same time. There was the switch for the music analysis judge, and then there was an update to the music analysis sheet. And the thing about it is they're married to each other, if you will. Mm-hmm. So they're taking, I think the best way you explained it was, they're taking the judge. You typically have 2 percussion judges. You have one up top and one down on the field, and you're moving the percussion judge that's up top over to a music analysis position with an emphasis on percussion, correct? Or is that?
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
So what we want to make clear is that it's not music analysis percussion, music analysis brass. It's not that. It's music analysis.
And there's 2 of them.
And there's 2 of them, and one person has a percussion background. They're a percussionist. The other has a brass background, and so your experience colors how you see things. And so the thought is that we'll get a much more holistic read of the groups, because some people, if you have a brass background, you're going to have more of that knowledge, so you're going to tend to focus a little bit more. But it's not a music analysis, percussion music analysis.
Correct. Gotcha. And then the sheets themselves, it went by pretty quickly. Everybody seemed to talk about it, but the idea of like changing the sheets themselves, that's a massive change. That's not a small thing to go through. And what they've done is kind of taken the original music analysis sheet and that percussion analysis sheet and kind of married the 2 together. And I think they're going to be tweaked. It's not completely finalized, but that's basically what they did. They kind of combined the language so that the new music analysis judge with a percussion background can incorporate some of that, I guess, percussion lingo, if you will.
Yeah,
is that
and
the
their
way
prior knowledge, entirely.
I think a lot of it was the percussion ensemble sheet was only 2 years old, so it had gone through a very rigorous process and lots of debate on the verbiage and how to get that kind of holistic view. So marrying the 2 was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is that it's like you said, like everything's gone through a ton of changes over the years and a ton of perfection, and they didn't want to just necessarily like throw that all out the door and start completely new. So bringing that over is something that ended up happening. One of the interesting ones was a rule that it started off as a no scores before July 1st, got modified into a 5-man panel rule proposal that was, I think it was originally passed,
switching.
No. Then it ended up becoming the 8-judge panel, which was passed for 2019.
Yeah.
So it went from this like no rules before July 1st to an 8-man panel in 2019. It was this weird kind of
made the Frankenstein its way through it.
But updating to 8-judge panels.
It's going to be great.
In 2019,
I think it's going to be great.
It's a big move for DCI as well too, just from a business standpoint. Like adding the judges across the tour, that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
it's a lot going on there.
I don't know how much you guys want to discuss this, but I know that this whole 5-judge versus 8-judge panel has been a big point of contention in the West Coast versus East Coast kind of debate. Just in that many shows on the West Coast happen to have 8-judge panels, more so than the Midwest shows that are a little smaller have 5-judge panels. Now, everybody's seeing 8 judges from right out of the gate, and they're going to get that feedback and be able to build out their shows a little earlier across the entire country.
Yeah, and that's, I think, really where the whole proposal came from was, before July 1, everyone's still really getting the show on the field, and let's take these big, broad comments. Let's not get in there and try to find all the ticks, because you don't have to look. In late June, they're very apparent. So it was, if we've got a 5-judge panel, the proposal, how it ended up was instead of having, a brass, percussion, or visual proficiency judge, which is kind of what they rotated, the thought was to have a second, either music analysis or visual analysis judge, so that all the judges were kind of the up top folks.
So big broad strokes early in the season with just 5 guys, because that's a lot for 5 individuals to soak in a drum corps show. Especially early season when things, like you said, things are a little rough around the edges, but everybody's a little rough at that point in the time, at that point in the season. And then one of the things that kind of got through, it went through for next year. I think we're going to come back around to it and take a look at it. Is updating the meeting itself, the annual Rules Congress, to every year, because right now it's set for every other year, but with the idea being is that let's get the instructors in on a yearly basis, so that we're getting that input, getting that update, and allowing things to, if we didn't like this, let's get that changed immediately, rather than waiting for a full 2 years. So there will be an annual Rules Congress next year, in addition to the one in 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
I had to make sure I didn't do my math. It's early in the morning right now.
Yeah.
Some of the things that did not go through, top 15. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think it's the same mentality as the increasing the membership size, but like, at what point do you stop? Like, if you're just doing it to let more people in, just to give them that finalist experience, then what do you let 25, 50 cores in? So I think it's great to keep it at 12, keep it nice and tight. Like a 3-hour, 4-hour show on a Saturday night is a great thing.
Yeah, it's nice and tight. It's still a long
It's still
night.
long, yeah.
I think logistically, what folks may not seem is like, it's just 3 more groups, but we've got the Marine Drum and Bugle Corps, you've got the open class finalists, you've got the encore, so there's probably about an hour and a half to almost 2 hours of additional
extracurricular,
besides the groups. And the other thing that I think was an interesting point that maybe people wouldn't expect was a lot of the 12 through 15 corps that place in the area, they didn't want it.
Yeah.
They said, when we make it, it's a huge deal, and they felt
exciting.
They felt that like opening up to making 15th would not be as exciting as 12th is right now.
Yeah, I think there was a comment said, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, so I don't want to misquote anybody, but there was a comment like we're right on that cusp of making the top 12, and we've done a ton of work to push
and now you're just gonna
to get right there, and then to water it down, if you will. That's just a layman's term for it, but to water that down means it kind of devalues the work that they've done to put in. So it's an interesting prospect of, like, you're right there. You could have made it had you had this rule been in place, but you're one of the ones that are saying no.
Yeah.
Like, we want to make it on our own.
Yeah, and I can tell you, because I taught a corps that had been out of finals for years, and when we made finals that first time, it was like we won DCI.
Yeah,
I mean, really, that the kids were just as excited. I think to 2016 when we won at Bluecoats, and it was almost exactly the same feeling.
I totally can relate to that, because when I marched Glassman in 2012, we got 14th place. And all season, we were fighting for that 13th spot, 12th spot. It was like within reach. And Glassmen are traditionally a finalist corps. And so, like, although we didn't reach it, we did see the other corps who got 12th that year, Blue Stars. They jumped, I'm not sure, Troopers or something, and whoever was in 13th that year. And they jumped them on semis day. And, like, they were going nuts out in the lot. It was just fun to see it, let alone experience it. Yeah.
Ordinals was something that was brought to the table, as far as in the basics of ordinals. If you're not certain what that is just kind of sterilize the scores, if you will, not necessarily releasing scores and details of scores, but just placing, a 1, 2, 3, 4, and just saying, okay, here's 4 cores. I like them in this order, and that's the justification for how they end up in the placements. You see something very similar to that here in Texas with the UIL system. Yeah. You'll watch a set of bands, and you'll watch 10 bands, and the judges will go 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, and then the average of that's their placement, and then that's how they end up falling out. It's a radically different concept for drum corps.
Yeah.
How do you think it would have gone down had it passed?
Well, it's interesting because at the caucus they handed out info. They did, I think it was maybe 10 shows from 13, 15, and 17 just randomly selected, and they ran the numbers of what would have changed over, I think it was about 300 shows, and it was about 3% changed.
Wow, that's more than I thought would have changed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
So,
also,
so what you're saying by 3% change, meaning, you know, had they used ordinals versus the scores, the cores would have moved up or down.
3% of the time, yeah.
3% of those scores, and like
Yeah.
300 shows or something like that.
Wow.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Which to me that doesn't seem like a lot, but where I think maybe that's not the best comparison is that I believe if judges were judging with the ordinal system in mind, it would be a lot different,
yeah.
than the numbers.
It would be it would definitely be a different philosophical approach to judging.
Well, and another thing that was a part of that proposal was that they were going to use a GE tiebreaker, right? Like at least that's what I thought.
The GE tiebreaker would still be points. So the GE judges would write a score down, and in an event of a tie, they would use this score.
Okay,
to separate it.
So they keep the scores. So it effectively, in that realm, would not be different.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there's no current GE tiebreaker.
Right.
So that's like Bands of America. They have a GE tiebreaker, and you saw Carmel won in 2016
Right, because of the GE.
because of the GE tiebreaker over Avon.
Yeah, and it was Avon had won 2 of the 3 captions, if you will, but then Carmel got the GE caption, and that one caption
was it.
carried the weight
Yeah.
over the other 2. So
Yeah.
and then this is actually going to be a good bridge here, because now we're going to jump into the one that it didn't pass the instructor caucuses, so it never even got to a place where we vote, and that was the limitation on brass amplification. So we're going to get into electronics, but that was actually something that was put out there. And I think what was interesting about it was there was this explosion last year of trying to mic the brass in certain different ways, using shotgun mics and individual ensembles. And what you saw at the instructor caucuses was hey, listen, let's explore this, let's develop this idea, rather than just immediately kind of rule it out, so to speak. And it didn't go through, but there was a ton of discussion on it. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, you're a brass guy, you're an electronics guy, so I'm going to let you guys kind of.
I wish I could have been there too. That would have been.
Yeah, I think what people should realize is that everyone knows that what happened last year was a problem, and that what happened last year was not done well. It was not done to the professional standards that everything else in drum corps is. So the conversation was around that. Was if we're going to do this, then we need to be able to do it right, and if not, then let's not. And I think the consensus in the room was that we can do it a lot better, and we can pick our moments when we do it a lot better as well. And
so like less is more kind of idea, or
Yeah.
at least whatever you do choose, it's got to be at a higher level.
More
right.
strategic, I
And
think.
More strategic, definitely.
And we talked as well, about the judges, holding us to account. If it's bad, let's slam it, and if it's good, then it's good.
Well, I think interesting point. It was one of the presenters that was with you, Michael Zellers, was talking about the idea of designing those moments into your show, and I think last year was a case of like, oh, let's try to shoehorn it in to some shows, and oh, we can do this. Well, let's just go ahead and do it. Well, I can go out and drink a full gallon of chocolate milk right now, but that's not going to be a good idea. That's not going to end well for me. So, but I think you're dead on. The idea is like, let's take this cool idea and let's grow it rather than just slam it.
in the
and
audience's
get rid of
faces.
it.
And one of my concerns with the rule as it was proposed is the ways groups would get around it is worse than the problem that we have of it not sounding good. So if you get rid of being able to mic the whole horn line, then people are going to record their horn line and sample it back. And then if you get that, people are going to have sample libraries of a brass, and get that, and you just go all the way down the line to where it's just a keyboard player. At least with the full miking thing, I think even the opponents can say, well, at least the kids are still playing. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
still the 80 brass. You still got to make a good sound. You still got to blend. You still got to have phrasing. You know, playing time. All those other things.
Yeah, and that seemed like to be what the point of what you were just getting at is like the whole coverage versus what amplification was that the exact discussion?
Yeah, I think the big words that are coming out are sound reinforcement, sound support,
Yeah.
And coverage.
Coverage is
versus-
the biggest thing really that
versus
came out of
just
this weekend.
amplification.
Yeah.
Because I think the original intent was amplification because you couldn't hear the front ensemble, you know, because you just couldn't hear them without them just like banging on the boards.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a great technique from a percussionist standpoint. It wasn't, you know, a marimba's not intended to necessarily be outside, you know, trying to play over the top of everybody. So using amplification to get them to bring their balance up to the ensemble is what the original intent was.
Well, sound reinforcement.
Right.
The same thing. You know, if you go to see an orchestra play outside or play with a movie theater, you know, to large amounts of people, you know, they're amplified and they've got delayed hangs and all that, so that you can have more people listen and take in the ensemble. But you don't want to know it's amplified. You know, you just want to be
hear
able to
natural
hear
sound,
it.
yeah.
Exactly, and that's kind of the point with all of the sound reinforcement that we're trying to do
Yeah.
in drum corps is, you know, you want to make. I always say, I joke, I want to make it the kids' fault. You know, I don't want anyone to say, oh, they sound bad because the sound guy doesn't know what he's doing or their speakers are bad. I want to say, you know, they sound bad because they need to get better at playing.
We got to rehearse more. Not my hands. My
Right.
hands don't have to rehearse more. You guys do.
Well, I think you mentioned something about balancing the idea of using mics and speakers to support the acoustics, the
Yeah.
acoustical performance of what the kids are doing.
Right.
And you mentioned the idea of like not noticing, you know, electronics.
Unless you want to. I should throw that caveat out there because we've done a lot of experimentation where we're going through the acoustic versus the electric, and that's the whole point conceptually. You know, our 2015 show was all about exploring that line and blurring that line, and you know, I got a kick. We have judges go, you know, I'm just not sure, you know, where the acoustic stops and where the electronic starts, and it's good. That's the point of the show. You know, so it can be used. It can be used for an effect, but when it's not, it needs to be completely transparent.
So, how do you feel like things are moving in a general sense as far as the instructors teaching the acoustical side of performance? You know, the battery instructors, the front ensemble guys, the brass guys, and then you have the electronics guys who are working to support that. How do you feel like that whole marriage is progressing throughout DCI and the marching arts?
Well, as a sound guy, you kind of feel like your role is very much a facilitator, you know. So whatever they're trying to do, we're going to make sure that we can do that, and we can do that in the proper manner. So you know, we have some of the best educators in the world in the summer, and I think that they're going to go, oh, we have mics, so we don't have to teach good technique or good sound production. You know what I mean? Can you imagine any of your brass instructors
Like backing off?
Yeah, no,
you know?
absolutely not.
So I think that's something that we need to realize too, is that we've got these world-class educators, and we're competitive people. You know, we want them to be the brass, and even, you know, if we're going to go use the mics all out, you know, if you have the best brass line and you put them through mics, you're going to sound better than the third best brass line that puts them through mics.
Right.
You know, so I think the kind of the fears of the dumbing down of the teaching and all that are going to be unfounded, because we want to be the best at everything.
Yeah.
Realistically speaking, is, you know, if you take the best brass line, you know, from a non-amplified, no electronics go through it, they're the best brass line, and these guys are the third best brass line. Is there any sort of electronics that can make up for that difference? Or is there anything that you can think of that would that
Make that third brass line better than the brass.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think you're going to have a hard time. There's, to me, the mics help with coverage, getting, you know, all that clarity to the box, but the mics put out what comes in, you know, and I think we got to have a little more faith in the judges that they're able to discern, more than just volume. If it
Right.
was just,
Yeah.
oh, you're the loudest, we get a decibel meter in the press box, and
like, oh, you
90,
win.
90.1,
Yeah.
you win. There's so much more that goes into it than
Definitely.
just volume.
You brought up a term that was popular the past weekend was coverage. Explain to people at home what you mean by that. That's not covering the folks who are performing. It's actually the other way around. It's covering the folks that are watching, right?
Right. So in sound reinforcement, you want everyone to have a great seat. You want everyone, no matter where you are, you go to a concert, no matter where you stand, we want you to be able to hear things clearly and hear things loud enough and all that. On the flip side, we also want to make it to where if you're in the front row, you're not getting blasted.
Yeah, your
and the
cheeks are like
folks-
flying back.
So with the speakers that most folks are using now, they're called point source, which is basically one speaker, on the ground and
Point it up.
right. So the issue is we have the judges, some of the most important audience members, they're 200 feet away, which means in order for the sound out of the speaker to reach them clearly, it's got to be pretty loud. Unfortunately, for the people in the front row,
That are 10 feet away.
right,
Yeah.
it blasts it. So there's a different type of speaker. The speaker is the same, but it's a speaker system. It's called a line array. So what that is instead of having kind of one big speaker and just blasting it, you have several little speakers, and they're kind of in an arc. So what that lets you do is it lets you turn down the speaker that's shooting to the people in the front,
Right.
and the ones that are shooting all the way to the top, you can turn it up. And so what you end up having is the decibel difference from, which is the sound pressure level or
Right.
loudness,
Yeah.
if you will, from the first row to the judges is a lot less than from that point source speaker, where the person in the front, it's super loud, and all the way at the top, it's still not loud enough.
So if you want to break it down this way, like you have your judges up at a high level, and as a sound designer and a brass caption head and the show designers themselves, they're designing the what's on the field and the speakers and everything else to be balanced at that point.
Yeah.
And if you're not sitting in that same level or same whatever, you're going to get a unbalanced, if you will.
Yeah. You're not getting the optimum experience.
Reflection of what's
Yeah.
on the field. So down here you're going to get really, really speaker heavy. Up here it might be non-existent. You may not be able to hear. But if you're sitting around here, you're probably getting a good balanced program.
Yeah.
With the line arrays, the idea is to be able to have just that one level now be all of these levels having a balanced representation of what's happening on the field.
Right. Yeah. It's
It's
crazy.
a lot to soak in. Like
It is.
I was just like, and like I said, but
Yeah.
well, what would you say to the folks that are just like, dude, unplug everything? Like, I think there was a comment saying like you should have 3 minutes of unplugged, no electronics, in the course of the show. Like, what would you say to that right now?
I would say it's not against the rules. If you want to
That's fair.
if you want to come out there with G bugles and no front ensemble, and do a super old school run and gun show, I think the crowd would love it.
Yeah.
I think it could.
And
be,
that's a sound guy. That's a brass. That's an electronics guy saying that it would be cool to unplug everything.
but I get it. I get it from the people who it was different than when they marched, and they missed the activity that they grew up in, and I think everyone thinks drum corps is what it should have been when they marched.
Right.
I think most of us,
Yeah.
and that's natural. What I would say, kind of in defense of the direction we're going, is the students that we have now are getting to take part in a production. It's
Right.
not just a
Yes.
drum corps
Theatrical
show.
production.
Yeah, and we talk a lot, and we're a little philosophical. We talk a lot about saving the arts and how do we get people more involved in the artistic process and all this stuff. And if you think about it, you've got an art project every year times 40, however many corps they are, that is new every year. You've got a new commissioned piece every year, and
Right.
these students get to take part in that huge creative process. It's not just you write it down and here's the show and there it is. It's all these interactions and changing, and let's try this and let's do this, and
Yeah.
what if we did this? And I think that's so. When you add all of these other layers, all the props and all the electronics and all the other stuff, it's such a different thing. It's
Yeah.
such a larger production that I think there's tons of educational value in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just hearing you talk about it like that, I'm going through my mind and I'm recalling something that was told to me when I was marching and at the end of the year, like, this is never going to exist ever again.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have people who aged out. You're gonna have, something's gonna change. You're never gonna have that same production over again.
Yeah.
And then even within the summer, every show changes because you make changes on a daily basis. So one performance is never the same as the previous performance. So it just expands on what you said, and it gives the kids themselves so much a broader performance background, if you will. I think you were talking about the idea that when I was marching, we didn't have the electronics, if you will, but that means I didn't know anything about electronics. Now the kids are coming out of these programs and they know more about electronics, mics, amplifications, and sound mixing than ever before, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that I like to say is, that's the world we live in now. As a percussionist, my senior recital, I had 2 pieces that had a track, and the other one was a concerto that I played with a digitized version of an orchestra. There's all these pieces now that call for electronics and microphones and looping pedals and all that other things. That's where the modern music idiom outside of our little world is shifting. So I think the more experience, the more microphone technique that these students learn, as band directors, and even if they don't do any of the new modern stuff, if you have a jazz program, you're going to mic every instrument, and you need to know how to do that and how to do it well. And I think these skills transfer outside of the marching activity.
Definitely. Yeah.
So
we have to move together, the music industry as one. Yeah, for sure.
So I think there's one resounding fact, and I'm going to say that, but it's not been that way. If you go behind the scenes, it's not about just making things louder.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely
not even close to that anymore. And not that it has been for a while now. It's actually been a shift that's coming, and now we're just kind of really starting to pull the curtain back behind it.
Yeah, and I think really, if you could sum up the weekend as far as electronics and sound reinforcement goes, we want to make sure that everything we do on the field is at the highest level possible. It's marching music's major league, and we haven't, in some areas. And I think electronics is definitely one of the areas where we need to be better, and everyone recognizes it. And I think you'll see this summer is going to be a drastic improvement. Yeah. People are saying, oh, we need to invest in the proper equipment. But more important than the proper equipment, we need to invest in the proper people.
Right.
The people who can run it and who can make it sound the way it needs to sound. And groups are doing that, and I think it's going to be a lot better this summer.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much for coming in. We really appreciate it. There's a ton of information to soak in, but I think it's all very, very valuable information. So, for Erik Kosman, thank you.
Thank you.
Andy Shama, Michael Gilly, and we will see you guys down the road.